So let's start off with the Shiur. The first thing that hits you as soon as you begin this Maamar, the first thing that everybody asks the question. He says right at the beginning, "Tzarich lahakdim tchila, klalas hahefresh ben oiris v'kelim, v'yidua da'oiro kli b'chinas chesed u'gvura." Obvious question. The Ben Chamish Lemikra knows Rashi, Pashas Bereshis. Bereshis ba Elokim, Elokim is Gvura, Shem Havai is Chesed, Havai is Oiris, Elokim is Kelim. Surely it's totally opposite to what we've learnt all over. What does it mean that Havai is Gvura, that Oir is Gvura? Obviously Oir is Chesed. So what is the Hagdara? How are we going to explain this, that all of a sudden now we're calling Oir Gvura and Kli Chesed? So we're going to have to say, and if we get this straight, perhaps it might help us all the way through the rest of the Maamar as well. We're going to have to say, why should Oir be called Gvura? Oir is Gilui, Vahi Oir, Oir Hayoim. So obviously it's an inyan of Chesed. Why all of a sudden is it called Gvura? So with Pashtus, we're going to have to be mechalek like this. It depends if we're talking about the tafkid, the function of Oir, or the mahus ha'atzmi of Oir. What is the Oir itself? What is its mahus? If we're talking about what Oir is, klape us, or the way we see Oir, obviously Oir is gilui, Oir is chesed. There's no shaila about that. That's what Oir is. That's what it does. It shines, it gives, it's hashpah. But if you talk about what is, to use the modern language, the DNA of Oir, what is its mahus, ha'atzmi, what's his interest, is you'll find a whole different, if it's the opposite way around. If you ask Oir itself, what does he want? He'll say, I want to go back to the Mocker. And the same thing you find to broaden the idea. Who's, for example, let's take Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mocker of all Giluyim of Torah. What is his inyan? Obviously, it's Oir, Torah, Zichur Torah's Moshe Avdi. But if you go to him and ask him to become a Rai Mehemle, to go and take the Yidden out of Golos, what's his first reaction? Shlach nabrash tishlach, send somebody else, it's not for me. He wants to be Behisboididus, he wants to be Ba'aliyah. There's a famous Kuntas Bika Chicago where the Fidik Rebbe talks about Asuri Mikan Leiskar of Lashom. When Moshe Rabbeinu saw the Labas Eish, he suddenly was something has to cause him to want to go out there, to move out of his own Hisboididus and his Aliyah. So if you're talking about Oir itself, Be'etzim, he's an inyan of Gvura, mitzad what? Mitzad that his inyan is Aliyah. He doesn't want to go down. So that's the nakuda of the why we should change here and called Oir Gvura and Chesed and Keli Chesed. Chesed is the other way around, but Keli is the other way around. Ruach HaBehema hi hayeredis lamata. But Teva, he's looking downwards. He doesn't go upwards. It's a famous vod from the Fidik Rebbe. He says, "Abahemot kemenish gezendem himmel." He never saw the sky. He's not interested. He's got his grasses down there. That's where he's into his food and his drinks. That's it. He doesn't look upwards. Why should he look upwards? A yid is shmar oshetevesu maremenechem. He's looking upwards. Azuchtecha odam hi ayla Ruach HaBehema lechatchila is down there. So if we're talking about the mahus ha'atzmi, just derech hagav, that might explain why, when he asked the question Benegeya to Kelim and Sif Gimel, and the end of the first paragraph of Sif Gimel, when he asked the question, he Ki'ilu has to bring a raya that Kelim also have a rotzai. If you look at the end of the middle of Sif Gimel, after the first part, he says, Gam etzem inch nispayla sha Kelim e bechinas shoiv. Sharach ram shar mavu bekam kelim sha Kelim e bechinas rotzai. And then he brings Nikra Eret, Sherotzah Lasais Kaina. Why does he have to bring a raya? We know that Kelim have a rotzai. It's not so much a question, but it's more meduik now that we understand that he's bringing a raya that maybe Kelim be'etzem have an inyan of rotzai. You decided that Kelim is kulei yeredis lamata. If it's Eret, Sherotzah Lasais Kaina, it has a tnu of aliyah, so that's also miguf ha'inyan mimahusay shel Kelim. Getting back to the Oir, what's the heichacha? What's one heichacha that we could see within the Maamar that should be the Hagdara Nechayna, that Oir be'etzem is Aliyah, and the fact that Kula is Hashpah and Gilui is not be'etzem Mahusay. One of the heichachas will be from the dugma that the Rebbe Nishraden brings further on, from the inyan of Bal Kochach Acharei. Bal Kochach Acharei, what he speaks about it in the Hemshech of Ranat. Why is Yeridas Hanashama Beguf considered Bal Kochach? There's a klal that any hashpah has to be berotzen. Every hashpah has to be berotzen. We're not talking about stam hashpah. We're talking about the neshamas coming down to be machaya guf. He has to do it with a cheshik. He has to have a rotzen to be machaya the guf. Okay, by us we sometimes have a hashpah which we do miteiches gafia. So he says you ma'asin alat stock, you have to give it. Even then, Chazal say you got to give it with a smile. You have epis ashtikla rotzen. You have to have a bit of positivity. So why is it called Bal Kochach when it comes to the neshama b'derech klal? A hashpah has to be berotzen or becheshik. And we're talking about a whole lifetime. He's been machaya guf. You're going to say no, it's a Bal Kochach. He's been tied up to the guf. He has no choice in the matter. Obviously, it's berotzen. They say there's a milsa de bedichas, the famous mice of the two neshamas met halfway. One neshama was coming down, a new baby is coming into this world, and this 97-year-old's coming up, krechtzing. So he says, tell me, the new one says, well, what's going on down there in Oyam Hazeh? She says, I have to speak your sprach, so let me explain to you. You know the Dalad Meichin and Atzilus Chochim, with one Hanochas Tefillin, you have all the Dalad Meichin, Meir Bizgalus, and it's, wow, he's excited. Someone tells him another mitzvah in his sprach. He's very excited. At the end of the conversation, he says, how come you're looking so sad and and you look so weak? He said, till you get the money to pay for the pair of tefillin. So what I'm trying to bring out is that the yerida, the neshama, the guf is mitei chayes and cheshik. So why is it called Bal Kochach? So he says over here, but I'm going before that. In Ranat, he says, even the etzem yerida, and the Rebbe brings this down in one of the Maimarim, anything which is not mitzad atzmai is called Bal Kochach. If it's not mitzad your mahus, mitzad you, it's called Bal Kochach. For example, you have, for example, the inyan of rotzen chitzayin, rotzen pinus, the same idea. Why are you traveling from here to India to dig up some diamonds to sell them in that country, then come back with your money? You have a cheshik to travel to India to dig up diamonds? Avada, he has a big cheshik. He's mamish into it. If you ask him, Ilu Yitzu, you'd have diamonds in your backyard, or you had a tree growing dollars in your backyard, would you still travel to India? Shumayfin Lai. So why are you traveling? What's your big cheshik? Because Lapel, there's no other way. The diamonds are there, so I'm going to have to travel over there. He has a cheshik, but it's called a rotzen chitzaini. Das nicht ich. My rotzen pnimi is the teitzoah. The same thing, the neshama wants the aliyah avada. If you could have the aliyah without having to go down to the guf, he wouldn't bother. We tell him there's no other way. You're going to have to go down, and that's where the diamonds are, in the guf, in Oyam Hazeh. Oh, if that's the case, then I want to go down to the guf. So is that called a rotzen atzmi? No. That's called Bal Kochach. In other words, there's a sibik itzaini which is causing you, which is not your etzem mahus. So from here you see that the oir is gilui. What is considered the mahus ha'atzmi is what he asks, what he wants himself. The fact that oir comes down, that is the pearl mamish, it comes down. But what is mahus ha'atzmi is to stay up. And this Bal Kochach that he gets brought down to a lower levels. So that will be the first nakuda of what it means that oir is gvura. Now let's go a bit further. There seems to be two mishalim being used over here for this inyan that oir has the teva of aliyah, or eish has the teva of aliyah. Somebody asked this question that Acharei is using two mishalim, but sort of in besirugim, sometimes like this, sometimes that. First he uses eish with the eitzim, and then somewhere along the line when he gets to the neshama, he uses the nitzutz to the avuka. Is it the same thing, or is it a different moshel? Seems teva ha'esh is to be nichlal and it's moker, so what's the difference if it's got eitzim or if it's a nitzutz? Is there a difference? So I haven't seen anywhere that it should explain that there's a difference, but l'cha'ora, I'll be pashtus, it would go like this. Eish with eitzim, the hadgoshi is the eitzim, the achiza lamad. Nitzutz and avuka, the hadgoshi is the hiskalos. Right? The duma of eish is, we're saying, the eish would otherwise disappear, would go out. You need to have eitzim to hold it down. Where would it go to? It would go to Tachas Galgal. How it's going to reach from here to the Galgal when it takes, I don't know how many days for a rocket to reach the moon. I don't know exactly, but that's its direction. And when it leaves, it disappears. Nitzis with Avuka doesn't really disappear. With Avotis, he wants to be Nichlal, he wants to go home. And where's his home? His home is in the Avuka. So he wants to go to the Avuka. So the Hadgosh is not something that's holding him back. It's more the Teva Ha'esh that he wants to go back to his Mokkah. That's the L'cha'ira, the Hadgosh with the two Misholim. Now, Lamai Nafkimina, it would seem that it's more Negeh, Benegeh to the Neshama, would be more Negeh than Nitzitz with the Avuka, and more generally is the first. The general concept that we're saying here, that Eish needs something to hold it back, that you can have a match with a fire, a candle, you need oil, something to hold it down, that you understand with that muscle. But if you somehow want to be madgish, the inyan of neshama, the moshel of eitzim wouldn't work so well. Let's think of it for a second. The fact that the neshama is held inside the guf is because of the guf. He's makdim at the beginning of the Maimer. By the way, it's a new Pirush in Tanya, which we didn't think of. Man de nofach miteiche nofach. The Rebbe Rashab here makes clear that there's three things. There's where he's going, there's the neshama, and there's the man de nofach. The neshama is mipnim yusay, mimuhusay, very, very deep. So what would that be? L'mayla chochma vatzilus. Take it higher if you want. But there's the man de nofach, the person, the va'ata meshamra bekirbi, the one who's making the neshama come down. The shlishi hamadaba, that's l'mayla mishneha. So the chibur of the neshama and the guf has got nothing to do with the guf. The guf is not like eitzim that's got fuel in, and therefore it's going to hold the fire. The neshama is not going to stay in the guf because the guf is fuel. It's going to stay in the guf because the atam neshama bekim, because the abish needs to be mechaber. So it's not so mechuven to neshama and guf. Masha'inkin the etzim inyan that fire wants to go up and this just wants to be nichlan avuka. That we get. You don't need the eitzim for that. We need the nakuda that eish wants to go home. It's possible. Well, this is already, I have to check up if it's correct, but it's possible that the muscle of nitzis and avuka is mamish mechuven to neshama much, much more than the inyan of eight. Not just because of the inyan hanal, that there's no eitzim really holding it, but because there's also an inyan omak yesa. Just L'Rav Chedemilsa, we'll talk about this for a second. There's a diuk from the Frierdiker Rebbe in the famous Hemshech of Tzadik Daled, where he talks about the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, in Perek Yutes. Is there a Tanya here? It would be a bit easier. There used to be a Tanya over there somewhere. Thank you very much. In Perek Yutes, the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe is, you can see a Shinui Lashon, which the Frierdiker Rebbe is Medayikin. He says that the Alter Rebbe says that the Oyer Ha'esh Chafetz B'Tivoi. There's a whole sikh about Oyer Ha'esh. I'm not going to get into that, but he says Va'af Shal Yidei Zeh Yikove V'Lo Yoy Klum Lamata. The Eish is going to disappear. V'Gam Lamayla B'Shorsho Yisbatel Oyer B'Mitzias B'Shorsho. Afal Pikein B'Kachu Chafetz B'Tivoi. Right, so it's quite simple. It's going to go up to the source. The Seid Ha'esh, it's going to be in his battle completely. Kach Nishmas Ha'adam. He also wants to go out. Hagam Shetia Ein Ve'efes V'Tispatel Shom B'Mitzias Legamri. But he doesn't finish. He says V'lo Yishai Mimena Mu'uma Mimahusa V'Atzmusa Harishin. These extra words. Say Tispatel B'Mitzias Legamri, just like the Eish. He adds on a few words, which means to say what? There's nothing that's going to remain, but there's something that's going to remain. Nothing's going to remain, but something's going to remain. This is one of the Inyonim Amukim in the Hemshech of Tzadik Daled, which is not completely explained. The Hemshech stops in the middle, Kiyadua. But this is one of the Nakudas that the Eish, when it goes back to its source, there's nothing left. That's it. As you say, Eish, there's no fire there. Look at night times, you look at the moon, you don't see anything. You say Eish over there. You say Eish is choshuch, it's dark. Masha Inkein, when the neshama is nichlal bimkeir, he says the mimuhusiv musa harishon, there'll be nothing left. But epis was for bleiben. In a neufen of ein ve'efes, a neufen of bittel, at vekas, whatever. But there's something else is there because, And this is where there's in that Hemshech the Rebbe brings down the Dugme in Nigla. Remember the Dugme in Nigla? The Rebbe brings down that when you give the Chat Machzas HaShekel over to the Beis HaMikdash, there has to be given over completely. The Lashon is Kupa Yafa Yafa. It has to be completely, it's no longer your money. It belongs now to the Tzibur. It's Mom and Hektish. And yet we find that Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Eibishter, Al Teifen El Milchasam. Ignore that. What do you mean El Milchasam? They have any share in it? It's not their money anymore. It became Mom and Tzibur. It became part of the Klal. There's no longer a prat that you can say Al Teifen El Milchasam, their shtichel don't take. Elamai, the vort is that even when the prat gets nichlal in the klal, epis hakiyum bleibt. There's some kiyum to the prat. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, B'Torah Mehemno, the Rebbe explains after Moshe, was able to say, I can pinpoint it, so to speak, don't accept their chelik. So even when there's nothing that you can be mafkin between this piece and that piece, there's still epis vos. So Ula Yeshloima, I just have to check up that the moshel of the avuka is more doimer to that nakuda. Because when the fire leaves, in Mefurish and Tanya, it's gone. That's it. There's no fire left. It's go back to the Seder Eish. Basically, there's no fire. But when the nitzutz get nichlal in the avuka, it's lost. There's no fire. It's just nichlal in something that's high, a bigger fire. It's a small fire inside a big fire. There's not nisbattle that there's nothing there. There is something there. So it could be that mitzad the mailas inyan hanashama, that it kiyumay nisha, that it's always going to remain something. It's never going to become ois. It's just going to become ois memuhusav atzmusa harishon. But there's still going to be something there. Is the moshel of the avuka is better. That's why it says in other places that which is a greater bittul, the bittul of shaga betiara mayahani, or nitzutz eish in avuka. Which is a greater bittul? Pashtus, you say, well, nitzutz in the avuka gets lost completely, becomes part of the fire. Mashenk in the shaga betira, the fire is there. You probably don't see it because the sun is shining and are very directly on it. You don't see. You just see a match getting blacker and blacker. You don't see the fire until you feel it. Then you'll suddenly remember there's a fire there. But otherwise, you won't see any fire. Why? Because shaga betira. So it looks like that. It's not such a big bittul because there's fire there. The vort is it says state up that no, there's more bittul in the shaga betira because what is he being nispatel? Klape whom is he being nispatel? He's being nispatel agabi something which was be'ein aroich. The sun is be'ein aroich to a match. So this fire, although it's a b'metzias, and you afterwards in a bishkia you'd be able to see it, but now it's being nispatel agabi something which is be'ein aroich. That's emes a bittel. Masheika the nitzn avuka das is metzias. Is fire and is fire, so it's a bigger fire. So there's still always it's still fire. It's not maharis the metzias of the eish. It's just taking it to the next step. A bigger fire. So it could be the dafka by Agam, he uses these two mishalim, how should I say, besirugim, he mixes them all together, but it would seem that he introduces the moshel of the nitzis with the avuka, dafka when he starts talking about the neshama and the guf. Okay, so that was one thing. We spoke about the what's the pshat, that it's gvura, and the two mishalim. Now there's a third thing which people, I've got a few questions about the hemshech of. See, there seems to be a bit of something epis-gate donished. At the beginning, he starts talking about. I think you asked it. He starts talking about the why is it called Oyer v'lo shefa, and he says why is it called Oyer v'lo shefa because of dveikus, and then he starts all over again. Sif beis u'biyah inyan yedu b'chipirush Oyer and Sof, and goes to another beer in Oyer and Sof. Oyer meaning that it's Oyer, it's a ha'or, and it doesn't take anything from the market. The flow doesn't seem to go so well. You understand what I'm saying? He starts talking about oil over here, and then goes again oil. Be inyan, you do a bepirish oil and sof. He's starting a new subject. You know what I'm saying? On page, you know what I'm talking about? Page Reish Lamed Daled. He starts talking on the line begins b'shem oil. He says echad time is oil so again we come b'shem oil v'lo shefa. He says because oil is dovuk. Oil is dovuk. And he continues with that, again, it has a rotzai, and then he starts sif beis, so bio inyan, like we're starting a new bio. Then he do a bepirish oyer and sof, and goes to another bio and oyer and sof. It sounds like it's two different biorim. Right? Well, the truth is, it is two different biorim. Not just because of the teichen of what he's saying, that he's talking about dveikus, and here he's talking about that it's a ha'ara, which is not, is not poil any aspilus in the mocker. it's two different inyanim. If you remember Dayik in the Loshen, when he starts on page Reish Lamed Daled, and he starts the whole inyan of oil, he says, "V'zel echad ma'ataimim she'ha'oiris ha'elyonim nikroim b'shem oil." What's up with oiris ha'elyonim? You should have said she'oir and sof. Oiris ha'elyonim. In other words, from here till the end of this sif, he's not talking about oir and sof, dafka. He's talking about oiris ha'elyonim. He could be talking about lifnei tzimtzum. He could be talking about acharei tzimtzum. He's talking about inoilam esbiyah down here. He's talking about oir bechlal. Oir bechlal is called oir and not shefa. Why is it called oir and not shefa? Because it's dovuk. Okay. So what's biyah ha'inyan? Biyah ha'inyan is when he finishes off the sif about oir, that it's oir and not shefa, which means that what? Dveikus. He then finishes off saying that oir has a rotzai like eish to go l'mayla, and therefore how you mamshich oir, you need to do the avodah of being ma'oiri, so rusul l'tati, so rusul l'eila. Ubiyah ha'inyan is coming behemshich to that. Behemshich to what we finished off the sif rishon, the sif aleph. That is a rusul l'tati, so rusul l'eila, that how you mamshich oir. Oir on its own would want to go up. Like I said before, it's gvura, so it wants to go up. How you mamshich it down, you have to do some type of avodah, which we'll discuss later. Is ubiyah ha'inyan, we're going to have to go back to the etzem inyan of oir and sof, in the Shoirish, not Oiris Elyonim of Seidish Shtalshus. We have to go back to the first Musig of Oir and Sof. Why? We have to talk about the Musig of Oir and Mo'or. We have to talk about why Oir and Sof is called Oir and not Mo'or. And here is where he's Mechadish, that Ein HaMoshel of Oir HaShemesh Deimer Nimshel, Oir and Sof. What does he gain by doing that? He's explaining why you need Avodah. On this nekuda, you need avodah. What's the reason why you need avodah to be mamshech any oiris lamayla? Because all oir comes from the moir, from atzmus. And how does it come from atzmus? So usually it explains that oir and sof is called oir because it's like a ha'ara. It doesn't take anything away from the moir. It's not nispor. It doesn't matter where the oir goes. If it goes into a palace or goes into a garbage dump, it makes no difference to the oir at all. So that's ha'ara. It's a ha'ara. That's the mile of the shem oil. But bezeh ein hamoshel deimer nimshov oir hashemesh. Oir hashemesh is called oir, but it's behechrach. Ma'ashein ken lamayla, the oir is not behechrach. It's berotzen. So if we go to the shoirish of kol inyan ha'oir, right back to the source, the oir is only berotzen. If that's the case, it's totally on his rotzen. So you have to be ma'oir of the rotzen. Therefore, oir on all Seidish Shtalshus is going to be the same rules. You're going to have to be Mo'eris, Rusul Tati, Rusul Leila. Once you get to the source of it, that Bia Inyan Pirish Oir and Sof, he is starting a new Inyan. Beforehand he was talking about Oiris Bechlal, Oiris Ilyanim, it could be Seidish Shtalshus, wherever it is. Now he's saying, Bia Inyan, we have to go back to the source and the Shoirish Advarim. Where does Oir start from? Why did we call Oir and Sof Oir to begin with? The reason why we called it Oir and Sof is because it's only a Ha'ara, and it doesn't take it away from the Mo'ar. So, like Oir HaShemesh, it's berotzen. Now, you can ask a question, how can it be berotzen and like a ha'ara ba'alma? Something which is berotzen, the ha'ara, requires some effort. And here you're saying that the oir mamish doesn't matter anything to the moir if the oir came or it didn't come, if it's a cloudy day, it's not a cloudy day, it doesn't take anything away. So how can it be both things? How can it be berotzen and also b'derech memela, b'derech ha'ara, right? Yeah. Everybody following what I'm talking about? Yeah. The question is an obvious question. How can it be both? Well, the answer is quite simple. Lamaila, any description which you have lamaila, the iki is the lamaila yusa of the mashal, not the chisaron of the mashal. The Rebbe brings this down actually b'negeh to oir in one of the siches where the Rebbe says b'negeh to oir hashemesh also, that there's a chisaron with the mashal of oir hashemesh. Or, for example, in the Sichas about it's a chelik zayin v'negeh to lekechem koyenu. If the Eibush is a kohen, so how is he metama to bury Moshe Rabbeinu? So the nakuda that comes out over there is when you're talking about a moshel, a maila, you got to realize it's only a moshel. It's not the nimshel. Why do I need a moshel? Because the nimshel is something else. It's only to help me to understand in a certain way certain things. I use the moshel. So there's always going to be a chisaron in the moshel, but this chisaron is not going to be in the nimshel. So Lamaila, when you say that Or is called Or because it's only a Ha'or and takes nothing away from the Mor, which would sound like it's B'derech Memela, not B'rotzen, we're saying that Maila Tachi, you have Lamaila in the Or and Sof that is B'derech Memela, it doesn't take anything away, it's only a Ha'or. The Chisaron with that mashal is that what? That is B'derech Memela B'hechrech. So he says that Chisaron doesn't apply Lamaila. It's B'rotzen. If the Eibush is Mei Or, it's because he wanted to be Mei Or. I can ask the question, if he wants to, L'cha'or, that's a shinui, it's taking something away from him. Before he didn't want, and now he does want. Again, the L'mayla Yusuf of the Marshal, not the Chisaron. He has the Maila of Baratzen and the Maila of B'derech Memela. Without the Chisaron of Baratzen and the Chisaron of B'derech Memela. Which is something which the mind can't really understand, because either or. Either it's B'derech Memela or it's Baratzen. The Maila, you can have the Mailas of both. The Maila of Baratzen and B'derech Memela. There is a mashal, it's brought down, that is the daima ktsas to these two things coming together. That you can have baratzen and b'derech memela, but the mashal itself needs to be understood. The mashal is from oir hanefesh. You see, akaponim, you can be mechiach that the same thing is happening by oir hanefesh. Oir hanefesh, if the nefesh is machaya the guf, is it b'derech memela? Sure. You bring the nefesh and the guf. Adam nefesh chai, he's alive. Just like you bring the candle in, it shines up automatically. You bring the nefesh inside the guf, he's alive. Fine. So it's b'derech memela, right? So you'd think it's behechrech. But you do find that the neshama can withhold certain koiches, or you find that when the neshama is nisgalgal in a guf, he's b'tzar. Why is he b'tzar? What's the difference to him? If he's an oil, he's in a place which accepts oil. If he's in a place which doesn't accept it, what's the difference to him? The oil is coming out, going in. It makes no difference to him. The answer is it makes a difference. Because you're forcing him not to be nisgala, and he wants to be nisgala. You're tying him up. That means it's baratzen. There is an element of baratzen. We don't see it as baratzen. We see it as b'derech memela. But by Emerson, there is an element of baratzen. Anyway, so that's been again to the hemshech of the inyanim from here to Bia Inyan. So again, beforehand he's talking about Oir Bechlal, but he's talking about Nisei Dishtalshus, Lav Dafka all the way up. Bia Inyan, Pirish Oir and Sof, all the way up. Let's go to the Sheirish Mocker. That since Oir and Sof is Beratzen, therefore it's not B'derech Memela. Therefore, if you want to be Mamshech Oir, you're going to have to do something for it. What are you going to have to do? Eisus Latata. Okay, since we're already talking about Isus Latata, there's a few klolim over here which is interesting, which you find in other places, but this is one of those places where the Maimah is Mairech more. We find this sometimes in the Rebbe's Maimah every now and then we have this Nekuda, but it's not spelled out as nicely as over here. And the same thing in the first, the Man de Nofach, what do you call it? The Chibun of Sham and the Guf. You have a few klolim. One klal is, we know a klal that how you mechaber hafochim, you need a koyach elyon to be mechaber hafochim. Well, here is one of the cases where he talks about it, that the chibur, the neshama and the guf, is bekoyach elyon, koyach ham. He brings a marker in halacha that you have to have a koyach hamafli lases, which is mechaber ruchnis and gashmius. What is this koyach hamachaber? We said earlier that's the man de nofach, the atzmusa, which is lamaylim yishneim. So whenever you have to be mechaber two opposites, or you have to be mechaber two things which are by ein arech zer lazeh, you have to have a koyach which is totally removed from both of them, and lamaylim from both of them, and he can be mechaber the two.
The Ramzin is not enough by itself to do it. The fact that now the neshama appreciates the mile of the...
But how is he mischaber with gashmius? Neshama, again, we said earlier, fire and wood make sense. These are the four yesodus of Olam Hazeh. They have some type of connection. Mashenkin here, you're talking about a guf gashmi, which number one is a guf a daimim of ben adam. A person's guf is a daimim. There's a moment in the beginning of Torah where it talks about that the gufim of Balei Chayim, the guf is at semeach, and the nefesh is a Baal Chai. They have a kirva zelazeh. This is a nefesh, which is a Baal Chai, and the guf is at semeach. It's not so far off. Here you're talking about a guf gashmi of adam. Was offer min ha'adam, he was a daimon. Well, he is a daimon. We have a guf a daimon. And the neshama is not stam neshama, it's a neshama of medaber. Beret nacha, we're talking about the chelik elokah mamish, the hayom yom mamish elokah and mamish mamoshes. These are two extremes. So it's not like fire and wood. Fire is one of the four elements, and wood is one of the four elements. What's the big deal? They have a kesher. Here you have l'mayla, the chiba doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. So to be mechaber, you have to have the man denofach, the keach hamafli, which is mechaber. So here you have oiskeret a little bit this nakuda that you need a keach elyon. Another nakuda, which is an inyan klali, which it talks about, is the whole musag of halos man, of ha'isarus l'tati, isarus l'eila. How does that work? For number one klal we see over here, that when there's a isarus l'tata, to be mo'ed isarus l'eila, even though we are be'ena reich to l'mayla, nevertheless the isarus l'tata has to have some type of dugma de dugma of what you're trying to be mo'era. So if you want to be mo'era, the Eibishter, to be megala, this high inyan, you have to do b'chol meidecha. Why b'chol meidecha? What's b'chol meidecha? Your b'chol meidecha is for another person who's a big tzaddik, this is garnished. It's like the Alter Rebbe says, l'gabi the tzaddik, the avedis habein is b'chal nisht emes. Aber fadir das emes, for this bein it's emes, for you it's your b'chol meidecha, that's the kena mo'era zayna maila. Ho gufa, how does that work? If it's not even tefes mokim, is the truth is he alludes to it at the bottom of the page, in the Ha'ara B'Chesed Hashem, the whole inyan of Isarus L'Tata Isarus L'Eila doesn't make sense. People, Nivroim, are not tefes any mokim l'gabe the Eibishter. And so when we mevatel ourselves to the Eibishter, in any way, any type of bittul, there's no real bittul, because l'chatchila we want a mitzias nifredes. Mitzad the Eibishter, everything is all him. So there's no mitzias b'fnei atzmai. There's nothing to be mevatel. Your avodah is not tefes mokim. So how bechlal can you have this whole geder of Isarus L'Tata Isarus L'Eila? The teretz is the Eibishter wanted to make it like that. B'Chesed Hashem, the Eibishter mitzad chastoi chafetz chesed hu, he made a system that your little avodah can be mo'era l'mayla Isarus L'Eila. Not because it's tefes mokim, because he wants it to be tefes mokim. So this is a yesod in the whole inyan of Isarus L'Tata Isarus L'Eila, that it doesn't work because it has to work. It works because the Eibishter decided. Once you put it in the system, this is how it works. But the Chatchila should be such a system that's only B'Chesed Hashem. That's another klal, inyan klali which you have over here. I think that's more or less it. There was something else what did you mention before about what did you ask before? I forgot what you said. Something about Meichen de Gadlus? What was it about? Oh, you asked another thing beforehand about how do you manage to stay with B'chol Meidecha, right? Well, the truth is, when you reach B'chol Meidecha, it's not something you can keep on with the whole time. But if you ask the Neshama Be'etzem, he has this thing the whole time. If you remember the famous Sikha in Mem Daled, it's played over and over again, the Yubes Tamas Mem Daled, where the Rebbe talks about Kerav El Taint. So that's just one line of the whole Farbrengen. There's a whole Farbrengen before that. And one of the things the Rebbe says is that memont von Ayiden nimna hanim nois, opposites, things that don't make sense. On the one hand, you ask him that he should stand with Chol Meidecha, he should have a Rotzei L'Mayla. On the other hand, you tell him, no, Neshama Beguf, you have to have Shmat Nafsh Seichem, take care of yourself, take care of your health, you have to do this, you have to do that. So are you in or out? In Welt or the Eiswelt? What are you looking to do? Stay out of the world or be in the world? Chiba hafachim. So be'etzem, it's very difficult to stand in B'chol Meidecha the whole time. But mitzad the neshama, it's shaychus, because be'etzem, that's what he wants. But tivoi, he wants to go up. It's only mitzad other things, mitzad the guf, that he has also, like he says, B'chol nafshecha is easier. Why is B'chol nafshecha easier? Because B'chol nafshecha, you don't have to get ois mitzias. You can be a mitzias, just have one to gill, because well, he says that the Rebbe said in the Sikha then, memont von Ayiden. So it must be that we have this Kayach HaMachaba. Exactly how it works, I don't know, but it works somehow.
The Sikha where the Rebbe sounds good, finding how you talking, without an answer.
Yeah, he's just saying it, yeah.
That's what it sounds.
What else was there? That's more or less it. Oh, you're asking how does a cotton see things, right? That was you asking. How does a cotton see things? What does it mean he sees things by often kloli? Well, you can have a sharp kid, he says, you can have a sharp kid that does understand the pratim. You have sometimes a sharp kid that understands business better than, yeah. I see it nowadays with the machshirim chadoshim. I need my kids to explain to me which button to press. So why is it? It could be sharp. They understand how the machine works. They understand the details. So what does it mean that they take things in an oifen of igulim and an oifen? So I think the details and the what he's talking about achas hameichan, I don't think he's just talking about in haskalas or in yonim. It seems to be he's talking about more like the inyan of das, the inyan of appreciation, das. What's the difference between a grown-up and a child? You tell the child, don't go over there, your white shirt is going to become full of mud if you go over there because there's a puddle there. Versteht sehr gut, but 5 minutes later, his shirt is black. Why? Versteht in seichel, aber dehet nicht. He doesn't get it, doesn't get the message. Because he took it as a haskalah, it's mimenu v'hola, it's an inyan out there. And das means it's him, it's zem negeya. So grown-up appreciates it. You wouldn't put your $1,000 in the hands of a child, but to a grown-up you would. Why? Because he has enough seichel. He doesn't understand what $1,000 is. He understands, but he doesn't appreciate it. He's got no acharei. So in das, they're lacking das. So it seems also in this rachvas hameichin that das, the way they take things, is in a klolistic way. They don't see they don't appreciate the details. They may understand details, but they don't appreciate the details. I think that's the Hadgosh. I think he doesn't even mention the word das here.
That's something that his mountain,
What's that?
There was some, I think there was a lot in mind with that the Kovetz could be a man sees a lot of things, but he can't necessarily appreciate things. In other words, his character was that he could come up with a lot of creative ideas of business, but not that he could appreciate, understand.
He can't be masbid, he can't be masbid in Hasoga.
What does it mean that Golomb are away from outside?
That's the question he asked. He didn't answer it yet. Why is it in a Ratzai? There's always a chibur of Oiris and Kelim. Kelim have to have a Ratzai to receive the oil. So there is always a Ratzai in Kelim. Like even the animal that doesn't look up to the sky, but it'll look up to whoever's giving him food. He wants his food, so he needs to have an aliyah, he has to look upwards to a certain extent. So, but Tivoi l'cha'oy, that's the question. L'cha'oy, he does have an inyan of Ratzai in order to be makabel. So it's not his etzem inyan. Beforehand we spoke about that. It's not his etzem inyan. His etzem mahus is ruach habehem hiyayed zamata. Then fracted the shayla. L'cha'oy, there is an inyan of Ratzai, and the rai is eretz Ratzai solasis or shein kaina. There is a bechina of Ratzai.
What's the problem with saying both?
It's both. Well, we were magde at the beginning that kelima achesed hamshacha. It sounds like that if it has a rotzai, it's not muhusay ha'atzmi, it's some scientific thing that happens. It happens to be this time. And he says, no, the Kelim do have an inyan of rotzai. Okay, I think some more. I said there's only one other thing which could be spoken about by Arichas G'Dayla if you want, but just to mention it, when he talks about the inyan of what we were talking about before, that oil has the inyan of Aliyah Lamaila. In the beginning, he talks about it in the terminology he uses that it's dovuk. Oir is dovuk b'mkoiroi. So just one about Varan, but Kitsa Nimitz. When you say oir is dovuk, because we learned before Samachei, right? So you want to make sure that it shouldn't be the same dvekus as in Samachei. There's dvekus that's talked about in Samachei, and there's dvekus that's talked about here. By Emerson, everything is dovuk l'mayla. Even a niver, which you don't see dvekus, it's also dovuk. He actually mentions that when they get to the guf. Doesn't the guf also have to be dovuk? It also has to receive chayas. Everything, memcha hakel ksiv. The truth is, everything is dovuk, just we don't see it. But everything is dovuk. But nevertheless, that's not the same dvekus as oir. Any dvekus that you find, for example, you have dvekus of kelim, or dvekus ne'elemes of nivroim, that dvekus is only l'tzorech kiyumai. Like we go to sleep to be refreshed, to be able to continue the day. So we have to have a rotzoi to be nischadish, opfrischen sich, and then we can go continue on the day. So the dvekus is a sort of a technical dvekus. It's like this foot is connected to the top of the table, but it's screwed in. It's not dovuk to the top. You screwed it in, you put some glue on it, it will stick together, but that's not what it is. It's be'etzem a separate piece, and you stack them together with glue. So the Nivra be'etzem wants to be a Metzias, he wants to go on his own, but a Ken Pashut Nish, so he has to go back to the source. So this going back to the source can be continuous the whole time, so we would call that Dvekas, but that's called Dvekas b'derech Yischadshus. Then there's Dvekas be'etzem. Oir is not Dovuk l'tzerech Yumai. Oir is Dvekas. That's the Geda of Oir. The Kol Mahus HaOir is Dvekas. If you'll find that in the Lashon, that brings down to one of the Maimarim, in the Ha'ara, Geda HaOir Hu Shadovuk. Bringing, of course, from other places, that you find this Be'ikin Tafshin Gimel, the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about. It's Dvekas is that's Kol Mahus in Yonei Be'etzem Atzmusei. That's what Oir is. It's Dvekas. It has no self. Now, how does that work? Why is Kol Muhusa Kol Etzem Atzmusei? Because when we think of Oir, we look at Oir as also the way we see it as Ki'ilu, it's a separate inyan that came from the Moir. No, that's Shefa. It's not a Shefa that comes out from the Moir, just it's called Oir because of whatever reasons. It's not a Shefa. It's a Gilu of the Moir. It's not there's something else over here. The Moir is now Misgala. Have you ever seen Oir? Has anybody ever seen Oir? This is just to prove the point. Nobody's ever seen Oir. You see things which the Oir is Megala. If you would be able to see Oir, then you should be seeing a streak of light going from the sun that's now in Australia through the sky reaching the moon. You don't see anything in between. It's dark. You see the moon because the Oir reached the moon and was Megala the moon. Oir has no self. It's nothing. You can't see Oir. You can see the reflection of things of the Oir. So going back to the Moir, you don't see Oir. You see the Moir being Nisgala. The whole Mahus of Oir is Giloy HaMoir. Or more so, even be to Megala other things. But let's go back to the Moir. The union of Oir is Giloy HaMoir. It has no self. It's not a Shefa that's Oirdik, and therefore it looks like this. Oir is nothing. Oir is Giloy HaMoir. The Dvekas of Oir is not something that Tzerich Yumei has to be Dovuk. Das is it. Das is called Mahusay. And that makes sense. That falls in line with what we're saying. The Oir be'etzem is Gvura. Means what is it? Its whole inyan is Dvekus to its mocker. It has no interest to go away because that's Hepich Mahusay. The fact that it does go away is because the Eibishter wants. Because the Eibishter is Barabasa. He wants it, he goes down. And if you want that to happen, you have to do Isur Latata. And I think we're done over time, so...